Okay, today you will study how the separation of insoluble solids from liquids. The process of sedimentation, descentation and filtration is usually used to separate insoluble solids from liquids. We have already understood and explained you that how solid and solid substance, that is solid to solid mixtures, are being separated using various methods, that is winnowing, threshing, hand picking, etc. But how you will separate a solid from a liquid? And first we will talk about insoluble solids. Insoluble solids are the solids which is not dissolved completely in water. That, for example, sand, bricks particles, etc. will not be completely dissolved in water. Whereas salt and sugar will dissolve in water. But the sedimentation and descentation process is used when there is insoluble solids which is separated from the liquid. What is sedimentation? Sedimentation is a process in which heavier particles of an insoluble solid in a liquid settles down. The solid particles called sediments will settle down during the sedimentation process, forming a layer. Afterwards, this liquid is settled down and glue for a while, and afterwards this liquid is poured into the another vessel without disturbing the sediments, that is without disturbing the layers of the particles which is settled down, and that process is called sedimentation. Now let's see what it is written in the textbook. Sometimes it may not be possible to separate the components of a mixture by winnowing and hand picking. For example, there may be a lighter impurities like dust or soil particles in a rice or pulses. You might have seen that in rice or in some pulses and grains there are so much very light particles, and sometimes it is also a clay or soil particles remain, and it is not been hand picked by your hands. So how are such impurities separated from rice or pulses before cooking? Rice or pulses are usually you wash before cooking. When you add water to this, the impurities like dust particles get separated. These impurities go into the water. Now what will sink to the bottom of the vessel, rice or dust? Rice. Why? Have you seen that vessel is tilted to pour out the dirty water? You might have seen and noticed when your mama is boiling a pulses or a rice. What does she do? She pours some water in a rice, keep it for a while so that the lighter particles, that is soil and dust, and will come up in the water, and you will find the water will also be slightly muddy, and sometimes also with a simple starch is also there, and so the water will change its color, and afterwards the rice and pulses will settle down because it is heavier material. So the heavier component will settle down at the bottom of the vessel, and the soot and dust particles, that is the impurities, will float in the water. And afterwards your mama will pour a water from the vessel to the sink or it in another vessel, and in this way the rice and pulses is washed away with the process of sedimentation and descentation. So, when the heavier component in the mixture settles after water is added to it, that process is called sedimentation. When the water along with the dust is removed, and that process is called descentation. Means the water which is removed from the above layer without disturbing the sedimentation which is settled down. So, that process is called descentation. See figure 5.8. Separating the two components of a mixture by sedimentation and descentation. Here mud and clay water is taken in one glass. Mix it together, soil and water, keep it for a while, and afterwards you will find that light heavier particles, that is sand, will settle down at the end of the vessel, and that is the bottom of the vessel. What you will do? Take another vessel in which you will pour a muddy water from the above the glass, and without disturbing the sand particles which is settled down at the glass. So that process is called descentation. Let us find a few other mixtures that can be separated through sedimentation and descentation. There are various other components also separated with the help of sedimentation and descentation. The same principle is used for separating a mixture of two liquids that do not mix with each other. For example, oil and water from their mixtures can be separated by this process. You already know that oil is a heavier material, so it will not settle down, it will float in the water and water will be remain in the other layer. If the mixture of such liquid is allowed to stand for some time, they form two separate layers. The components that form the top layer can be separated by descentation process, means slightly pouring to the another vessel without disturbing the layer. That process is called descentation. Let us again consider a mixture of solid and liquid. After preparing a tea, what do you do to remove the tea leaves? Usually we use a strainer to remove the tea leaves, right? Try descentation, means it helps a little. If you prepare a tea and you separate the tea leaves with the help of a descentation process, is it work? Then also you will find a tea leaves in your cup. But afterwards, what you will do? If you will strain with a filter or a strainer, then you will get a complete result. But do you still get a few leaves in your tea? Now pour the tea through a strainer. Did all the tea leaves remain in the strainer? Then this process is called a filtration. When you want a complete separation of a solid, insoluble solid to a liquid, then filtration process is used. Sedimentation and descentation process is not used in that process. Which method of separating the tea leaves from the prepared tea is better than descentation or filtration? Yes, it is filtration, because descentation you will get then also some amount of tea leaves in your cup, but in the filtration all the tea leaves are separate completely and you will get a clear tea. Let us now consider the example of water that we use. Do all of us at all times get safe water to drink? No. Sometimes water supplied through taps may be muddy. The water collected from the ponds or the river may be also muddy, especially after the rain. You will find the muddy water comes from the tap. Then let us see if we use some methods of separation to remove the insoluble impurities like soil from water. Read activity 5 with me. Collect some muddy water from a pond or a river. If it is not available, mix some soil to water in a glass. Let it stand for half an hour. Observe the water carefully and note your observation. Does some soil settle at the bottom of the water? Yes. Why? What do you call this process? That process is called sedimentation. Settle down of the heavier component, that process is called sedimentation. Now slightly tilt the glass without disturbing the water, so that again the mud will not mix with the water. Now let the water from the top flow into the another glass, from see in the figure 5.8. What will you call this process? That process is called descentation. Pouring of the liquid from the above layer is called, the process is called descentation. Now clear the process of sedimentation and descentation. Is the water in the second glass still muddy or brown in color? You might find that some of the water will be muddy or brown in color. It is not separated clearly. You will not get a clear water. Now what you will do? Now filter it. Did the tea strainer works? Let us try the filtering the water through the piece of cloth. In a piece of cloth, some holes or the pores remain in between the woven threads. You already know the muslin cloth. If you will take a small cotton clothes, you will take as a filter. These pores in the cloth can be used as a filter. If the water is still muddy, impurities can be separated by the filter that has even smaller pores. A filter paper is one such filter that has very fine pores in it. See figure 5.9. There is how the filter paper is folded in the form of cone, and afterwards it is used. It is kept in a funnel, and afterwards it is used as a filtration. Filter paper folded in the form of cone is fixed onto the funnel. The mixture is then poured on the filter paper. Solid particles in the mixture do not pass through it and remain on the filter. In this way, many of the things are separated using the filtration. So what is a filtration? The process of which two substances, that is insoluble solid or a liquid, are separated by using a filter is called a filtration. When filter paper or filter is used separate two things, that is two substances, that is solid and liquid, that process is called filtration. It is used in various homemade things also. For example, fruit and vegetable juices are usually filtered before drinking to separate the seeds and solid particles of pulp. You already know, to make a fruit and vegetable juices or soup, many times we separate a pulp from with the help of a filter. The method of filtration is also used in process of preparing the cottage cheese, that is paneer in our home. You might have seen that for making a paneer, a few drops of lemon juice are added to a milk as it boils. This gives a mixture of particles of solid paneer and the liquid together. The paneer is then separated by filtering the mixture through a fine cloth or a strainer. So, filtration method is used for removing the pulp from the fresh juice, and it is also used for preparing the cottage cheese at home, and it also used for cleaning the muddy water. During filtration, the insoluble solid particles remain in the filter and the liquid passes through it. However, the particles of the insoluble solid should be bigger than the holes in the filter so that they are retained in the filter. So, to separate a mixture of mud and water, the technique of sedimentation and descentation can be used. However, filtration is the best method to separate the components of muddy water. Now see, which method is used for separating the soluble solids from liquid. First of all, think about it, which are the soluble solids. The main two examples of soluble solids is salt and water. Once you take a vessel of salt and sugar and dissolve take a water and dissolve some sugar, 1 spoon of sugar in it, then it will completely dissolve. Will it be possible to separate a sugar from water now again once you get a sugar syrup? And also in the same way, if you take a water and put a small amount of salt in it, then it will completely dissolve afterwards. Then what will happen? Will you be able to separate a salt from the water, that is the salty water? No, it is not possible to separate a soluble solids from liquid, but it is separated by method of evaporation that you will study here. See activity 6. Add 2 spoons of salt to water in another beaker and stir it well. Do you see any change in the color of a water? See, heating a beaker containing a salt water. Here salt is taken as an example in figure 5.11. You can see a funnel, a beaker in which the liquid is boiled and a salt is there. See any change in the color of water. Can you see any salt in a beaker? There is no change of color also, because salt is also white and water, there is no change of color, and then also the salt is completely dissolved in the water. After stirring it, heat a beaker containing the salt water. What you will have to do, continuously heat the beaker so that the water will be boiled. Let the water boil away. What is left in the beaker, continuously start boiling till the salt particles will only remain in the beaker. In this activity, we use the process of evaporation to separate the mixture of water and salt. Water will evaporate and go into form of steam in the air, and the salt particles will remain in the beaker. The process of conversion of water into its vapor is called evaporation. So, in this process, heat is used. As a result, the liquid component evaporates, leaving the solid components behind. However, if you want to recover the liquid component, then we can use the process of condensation, which is discussed a little later in this lesson. What do you think salt comes from? Seawater contains, here you will study how salt water is prepared. How is salt obtained? See, I will explain you. Seawater contains many salts in it. One of these salts is the common salt. When seawater is allowed to stand in a shallow pits, water gets heated by sunlight and slowly turns into the water vapor through evaporation. In a few days, water evaporates and completely leaving behind the solid salts. In this way, common salt is then obtained from the mixture of salt by further purification. You might see in this picture, near the sea coast, there is a muddy panels. Shallow ponds have been made with the help of the sand there, and water is collected between these shallow pits. and afterwards it is kept open with kept open there the shallow pits for so many days or so many months. What will happen? Because of the sunlight, the evaporation process takes place and water will dry up, and solid particles, that is the salt particles, will remain in the shallow pits, and afterwards it is collected from the salt is collected, white particle salt is collected from the ponds or the pits, and afterwards it is purified and it is gone for, it is used as a common salt, and it is consumed by us. In this way salt is obtained with the help of evaporation process, but we cannot consume it as it is, so it is purified and filtered and then it is used for consumption. In this way salt is prepared. So here we end our chapter till here, and afterwards I will explain you what is the process of condensation in the next video. Thank you.